10 seconds.
Recording in progress.
And then,
Thanks, Mom.
and they said, don't bring any money, and, because you're gonna sell so many signs, you're gonna be making, you know,
Thanks.
and I was
Okay.
stupid and young, and believed everything
ready?
they said.
You heard about the play
So
advertising radio.
desperate to make some kind of a sale that I went to Newark.
Seeing quorum. Yep.
Recognizing a quorum, the chair opens the February 24th, 2024 meeting of the Community Housing Committee. This meeting is being held in a hybrid model, both in person in the hearing room of the Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, and remotely via the virtual computer platform Zoom. Committee members may participate in person or through remote participation pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on June 16, 2021, and extended through March 31st, 2025. The information to access this meeting via Zoom was published on the agenda with the town clerk and the town's website with a minimum 48-hour notice to the public. The public is welcome to attend in person or remotely. This meeting is being recorded.
So you'd want to recognize the
recognizing-
trustees?
Yeah,
that are
the
here?
Affordable Housing Committee is also joining us today. They do not have a quorum, right?
That's correct. The Housing Trust won't be calling to order. We do not have a quorum, so we'll be attendees at the Community Housing Committee meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just us two.
And we have one,
We have Lee and Palm and Josh.
so why don't you open by roll call vote?
Okay, roll call vote to open the meeting. Drew?
Drew Kraus here.
Greg?
Here.
Josh?
Josh is only viewing.
Oh, okay. Palm? And Lee?
Thank you. I'm just checking with Mary that she got my email.
Yes,
Can you
I
hear
did,
me?
thank you. And
Okay.
Pam, we heard that you were here, and John Barr is here.
And at this point, we'll turn the meeting over to the representatives from Barrett Planning.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for first a great MUC #1 meeting, and I'm sure what will be a great #2 meeting as well. What we would like to do today is kind of walk you through some of the consolidated ideas, because we saw these kind of themes jump out. And so we grouped some ideas together tentatively. We're happy to ungroup if you don't like how yours was kind of lumped in with something else. But just for purposes of taking what amounted to 26 separate ideas that had a lot of overlap, we did group some things together. And then we'll walk you through how we grouped them. And then I'm actually just going to ask the participants, I guess just the Housing Committee, not the trust, right?
No, the trust,
Okay.
the trustees can
Okay,
participate
sure.
fully, yep.
Okay. To let us know kind of what their top ideas are of those, so that between now and the next meeting, we are able to go into that third and final meeting with 3 big ideas that will be narrowed down into one, and that will be the Housing Committee's proposal. The first thing I'd like to do, though, is ask you, you received a summary of Housing MUC 1 responses, and I'm just going to ask you if you look through and see any errors with how we documented your input, please let us know. You can either tell us now, or if you want to email perhaps through Mary, or if you have my email, you're certainly welcome to email me, but probably easiest is to go through Mary, and then Mary will let me know. So if everybody who submitted an idea, first of all, make sure we didn't leave you off. I certainly don't want to do that, but also make sure that our notes are accurate to what you said. Some of them were from forms, so that was easy. It was just taking it right from the form, and others, it was based on our live notes, so if we missed anything, we'd like to know. But you can see the way that these all spread out. If they're counted separately, there were 26 ideas submitted or discussed, again with a lot of overlap. Does anybody have any comments on that, where they think something that they said was maybe we need to take another look, or otherwise, just please share your comments with Mary so that I think eventually we'd like to.
Those will become the minutes.
Yep, okay.
So just let me know if something that you said wasn't put just right, let me know, and I'll change them.
Okay, great, wonderful. So, like I said, we had then taken these ideas and grouped them together, and we tried to kind of group them according to things that we felt might directly influence the actual site design versus things that are more kind of ancillary in nature because they are something that could either be written into a future RFP or something like that. It's not really precluding any one idea. But for purposes of today, I just want to walk you through how we grouped them and the research we did in between meeting 1 and meeting 2 to give you a little bit more information. So I'm hoping between our additional research and this super helpful way of looking at the site that Kathy and Mary prepared, we can narrow down even more and hopefully feel comfortable synthesizing down into 3 major ideas. So the first kind of general category here, if you look on the left-hand column where it talks about, it has all the numbers that are listed there, that's just a cross-reference to the direct notes summary. So, you know, where it talks about building types, numbers 2, 5, 9, 13, 15, that means that we thought that those ideas from the summary responses correspond to that. So just in case you're wondering. And so you can see some of them are really kind of referenced quite a bit. And so we wanted to show that some of these ideas were really cross-cutting. And so the first idea was just about general variety in housing. And I see that I did not update that term, Mary. I know we had talked about, yeah. So housing diversity, we're just talking about in terms of variety, whether it's in terms of building types or income levels. We kind of heard both. So the responses or ideas that talked about building types, wanting to have kind of a diversity of whether it's, not just one apartment building or not just single family homes or anything like that, but having some variety. And then there are also people who specifically referenced mixed income. So the only information that we just wanted to kind of share with this based on our additional research, this is a great idea because it meets a lot of different needs. It's just to be aware that depending on the types of housing that you're bringing into the site, it may require different types of subsidy, and then the more subsidy sources you're layering, I know from following along on closing calls and whatnot that it gets very complex the more subsidy sources you have kind of stacked into one project. Again, it does not mean it's impossible, it's just something to be aware of. And then it also is helpful to know I think, look at some other examples to see that it might lend itself to the site being subdivided. So the top picture that you see there, it's the one from Orleans, the Governor Prent site. The first thing that I want to emphasize is that this is not a permitted project. This is, however, a project where a developer was selected through the for the procurement process. The town had acquired and wanted to dispose of a site for affordable housing development. And through a really comprehensive visioning process, the town, in their kind of requirements within the RFP, indicated that they wanted diverse building types, they wanted a mix of income, and the response that they got back, well, they got multiple, but the one that was selected, it was a 3-developer team, and they said right in their proposal, that the master plan will indicate the subdivision of the property. So, and that's because the 3 different types of projects that the development styles that the town wanted really kind of all lend themselves to different subsidy sources. So on that site, as it was proposed, there are, I believe, 7 single-family habitat homes. So part of the site will be subdivided off to habitat to do that. And then there are also townhouses, which in the proposal they are hoping to have be ownership, but they indicated there might be some flux with that. And then there are 2 on the rear of the site, 2 LIHTC rental apartment buildings. And so a lot of just kind of building diversity on the site, but it's also meeting a lot of different needs. You have ownership, you have rental, different income levels. And that's on a site that's about 5.5 acres, 78 units. So pretty impressive density there. But they, as I mentioned, it's 3 developers who responded to the RFP together and said, this will need to be subdivided. And so it'll come in phases. The other example below is from Wellfleet. This is currently under construction. And so this it's not quite as diverse in terms of building typology because it's townhouses and then a larger apartment building. But there is a range of income in there, and there is still, diversity of building types in that you have the townhouses and the apartments. And I don't believe there's any ownership on that one, though. And then we actually had a member at the last meeting suggest Mashpee Village as one to look at. I didn't put a picture in here, but just for reference, the way that project is laid out, there are 35 single-family homes surrounding the project. It says 10 apartments. That should say 10 apartment buildings. I apologize. So that has, your single-family homes, your apartment buildings, and it's all rental. And then just a final example, Province Post, which is also under construction. So this is 65 units on 1.8 acres. I mean, so 36 units an acre, but they went up in height, so 3-story buildings. And so I didn't put that one because it was diverse building types, but more diverse income level, because not only does it have 30, 60, and 80, but they also included market rate units as well. Because we know from just working with many communities that I think that it's not just about affordable rentals where there's a deficit. There's just a deficit of rentals, period. And so ensuring that a project includes the market rate as well is certainly beneficial. So that's idea one, just encouraging mixed housing types, mixed income levels. And then if you turn to the second page, housing for veterans, we wanted to separate this out into 2 ideas. And that's because I think the way people were talking about it, it was 2 different kind of things. There was the idea of more supportive housing for veterans, which is really going to be really going to influence kind of the design of the project. But then there was also suggestion for having a veteran's preference. So in whatever housing gets built, not so much that it's designed for veterans in need of supportive services, but if there are veterans in the lottery pool, that they would get a preference. And in the Affordable Homes Act, there has been an amendment that clearly allows communities who have inclusionary zoning to include a veteran's preference. So the group here is going to have to think about, when we talk about veterans housing, are we talking about something that is a supportive housing from an entity such as Soldier On or CVOC, or are we talking more about whatever housing gets built having a preference? And I do want to just point out, Mary provided a wonderful summary of some veterans home examples, just to give context. I don't know, Mary, if you want to say anything about it.
The top 2, and it's the last page in your packet, and it's just 1 page. The top 2 is Soldier On. One is in Leeds, Massachusetts, and I'm sorry, it has 44 units, but I didn't get the density, the acreage. But you can see that they embrace nice architecture. The next one is Soldier On Katie Doherty Veterans Village, which is for female veterans. They have their own building that's 14 units. And the one on the bottom is from the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center. That's their group home. It's 5 units for 5 individuals, and I think there's a 6th unit that's kind of like the person who provides care and services there. So that gives you an idea of if we carved off a bit of land for a veterans building with supportive services, what our local community partners or our statewide community partners have done in the past, and hopefully could do something similar here.
Can I just, at your suggestion, Mary, I reached out to Tunnels to Towers. They are overwhelmed,
Okay.
so they are off the list.
Okay.
Thank you for reaching out, though.
And I went on their website again, and it looks like if that was something we were willing to partner with them, usually, they can work with existing housing, so. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for putting that together. But you can even see right away in these first two ideas, they're not mutually exclusive. There's no reason you couldn't have, when you're talking about more diverse housing types, having the veterans housing as a part of that, whether it's through just a veterans preference or a building with specific for veterans' needs that would include services. The third idea, also, it's not something that needs to cut off any other idea necessarily, but the reuse of the current building. And that was talked about in two different ways in the idea sheets that we got. There were a couple of ideas that did suggest using the full building as much as possible, including using the classrooms to create studio or one-bedroom apartments. I know that's a bit depending on, I think the building report that was eagerly, everyone was awaiting is, I'm not sure if it's released, is it?
On the website.
Awesome, yes. So I think if this group is still kind of wrestling with that, that might be helpful to review. I don't know, Bill, is there anything that you think, I'll put you on the spot, but with regard to that reuse of the current building that might be helpful for this group to know for today?
Yeah, they had a price tag of about $41 million to bring it back up to a state that met all the codes and issues like that. The difficulty in residential is running all the utilities to the separate units, and the building is a difficult building to work with in that regard. So it's going to be costly if you use that building.
Does that include the classrooms and the gymnasium and auditorium?
The whole building was assessed. Sorry. Most of the issues are in classrooms. So there's a tunnel system and a heating system that results from one place, which is behind the auditorium, and then it goes through underneath all the hallways to all the wings, as it were. So there's not isolated separate heating systems. So if you put in residential, you're going to have per unit everything, per unit utilities, per unit heating, and everything else. So usually residential is more costly when you have to, go through a building like this.
Learn something new every day.
Thank you. Thanks. So, again, a couple of the ideas referenced using the classrooms themselves, and then there were also several ideas that talked about retaining and repurposing the gym and auditorium only. And I think one thing that'll be helpful for the group to kind of talk about today is when people are suggesting that, are you envisioning that as town-owned and managed? As in, here's a new community center that is the town of Yarmouth's, or are people thinking of that more as something that is privately redeveloped, or maybe it is leased from the town for use by whoever the future occupants might be. Whatever that might look like, I think that was really going to kind of influence how the project phasing may or may not happen as well. But just like when you're layering subsidy sources, keeping, factoring in how you would partition off that existing building and how that would be put out separately to bid, or what that would look like? It's not impossible, it's just pointing out that it would add complexity. I don't know if we have information at this time to really say, so I know the $41 million price tag, that was for the whole building. I don't know, I know you mentioned it was for the entire building, but if there's any insight about the practicality of retaining parts of the building rather than the whole, is there any
I
insight
think
on that?
that's something that might go to the MUC
Okay,
committee itself.
gotcha.
That sound good?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So don't assume anything's impossible then, and that, exactly, okay. So we are assuming all of that is feasible with the ideas about keeping the current gym and auditorium. The fourth idea, there were a lot of references to the idea of clustering housing, whether in talking about like building types or more commonly just prioritizing protecting undisturbed land. So this is partly why these cutouts that staff provided are so helpful, because I think when we're done running through this, I think it might be helpful if you haven't had a chance, if it's all right with the chair, to give people a minute to look around. Has everyone get a walk?
Most people I approached when they came in.
Okay.
So we took existing or proposed and very serious proposals and cut them out and put them on the map. There's also rectangular blocks on the top of different acreages. So like if you were saying, oh, affordable housing should get 6 acres, that is kind of the size of the 6 acres. And I think they go 4, 6, 8, and 10 acres. So it's just colorform, kind of play around with the site to see. What I found out through this exercise is that you could have home ownership, a small home ownership development, and a healthy rental development all on this site. The shapes would kind of fit in. But.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, looking at the Orleans example, that's only, 6-acre site that is perfectly able to be subdivided and include ownership and other.
That's the one over to the right.
So actually, the Orleans one, I don't think is up there, but it is in it.
okay.
Yeah, because I think it was one of the
That's
ones
the
where
one from the islands.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
the PNG wasn't cooperating.
We couldn't print out everything to
Yes.
scale, so some things are missing.
Okay, we can fine tune that.
10 acres.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that idea of protecting undisturbed land, that's an example of something that is almost a no-brainer, really, in terms of, I think, whatever the housing team decides, whatever MUC decides, that's the type of thing that can be encouraged to include in the RFP or RFPs for the site's redevelopment. It's just best practice. It's what makes sense and shows the town's commitment to environmental sustainability. The next idea, the housing authority, there were a couple of ideas that referenced that specifically for taking the currently talked about project proposed for Old Forest Road and like shifting it over to this site. My only thought/question with that would be, I think the assumption would then be that that site that is under discussion on Forest Road would not be touched.
Correct.
So then is, you know, from the perspective of the Housing Trust and the Housing Committee, what does that mean? Because you're not going to get as many units as if both sites were developed according to a plan that, you know, made sense. And so that's just the only thing in terms of furthering the town's housing goals and, you know, the HPP annual targets for production. So that was just the only thought that jumped out at me, and also just with regard to the fact that I know there's kind of a parallel process going on there. So the next 3 ideas on the bottom of page 2, they all kind of go together, but I wanted to keep them separate because there was some specificity in them, and I wanted to honor, I think, what was behind the ideas. So one of them was specifically habitat partnership. And so what that would look like, I think when, I believe it was Lee who had suggested this, it's in part because it's serving a specific income level, and it can be on site with other uses and other income levels. So if the idea for the whole site is to have mixed income levels, there's no reason that there couldn't be some space for habitat homes on the site as well. And again, that current plan on page 1 did just that with 7 habitat homes on the site. And then there was also the very cool idea of having a, probably also would be partitioning off particular lots for development, but a neighborhood or something of single-family homes with ADUs. And so there's an example that I'm saying to keep an eye on because I think it's even earlier in the process than Orleans. So the Marston Mills School Reuse, they're going through a process rather to redevelop that property, and they are, I think, coming to completion on a visioning process, and the last I checked, I don't think town council has chosen which scenario to go forward with, but unlike, some of these other examples where there's already been a disposition process, a developer's already been selected, this is much earlier than that. So sometimes we see if a town puts out an RFP or something that it's nobody bites. And so when it's something that's even that stage, pre-procurement, that's why I say it's a great idea to keep an eye on, and certainly not something that needs to be excluded at this phase anyway. And then also, just more broadly speaking about single-family or ownership, I did want to point out that some ideas also suggested duplex ownership. I know that's something that may require further conversation with whoever that development partner may be, if it were Habitat, what their ability to do that would be. There was also a specific suggestion for what part of the site to do that on. So land along the perimeter of Chickadee could be conferred or sold for single-family home development, with the idea that if it were just sold outright, that the funds that result from that could be used for, it could support the redevelopment of the retained area of the site.
Good idea, it's a good idea.
All right, almost done, my friends. So then if you go to page 3, I wanted to separate out 2 ideas about senior housing because it came up in 2 different ways. Some discussed it in the idea of age restricted and, being specific to 55 plus, maximizing the number of 1-bedroom units, having a local preference, available at different percentages, and so on. I believe there were 2 participants who specifically referenced some sort of age-restricted housing. And then there were other who really just they may have referenced the needs of seniors, but in a kind of broader sense where it could be more about, including plenty of smaller units in the site, especially including maybe a higher number of accessible or adaptable units. I do know from tuning into a recent housing committee meeting, I believe, that the town's affordable housing standards are under revision, right? And there's a kind of a criterion, if you will, for,
Right.
yes.
So we're going to get a lot of top-of-the-shop development. So the Community Housing Committee wanted to make sure that they're looking for accessible units, but they didn't want to stand in the way of a mixed-use development with all the housing on the second floor. That being said, right, if there was a possibility of having some units all one level on the first floor, we wanted the developers to know proactively, we're really looking for that. So.
Yes, which is always great.
It's a policy, it's not a regulation or a bylaw.
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. It was actually perfect timing because I was trying to educate myself about the ways that communities can do that, go above and beyond. And it's really, it's either going to be, if it's town-owned land, of course you can do that, but then also just through your policies of the projects that the town chooses to support and whatnot, just saying, hey, this is something we're looking for. I've also seen it referenced in design guidelines as well in some communities. And then really broad. This maybe should have been separated into 2, but mixed use. And the reason why it is so broad is some discussed mixed use with commercial. So as an example, specifically looking at top-of-the-shop housing, or even just on the same site, having the types of shops and whatnot that would benefit those who live there and, other members of the community as well. But then there were also references to just more broad idea of mixed uses, plural, that also may include kind of community uses, public uses. We heard reference to the library, the school. Again, if there's a public community center. So depending on how people talked about mixed use, that's going to need to be fine-tuned a bit, I think, if one of the top 3 ideas does look at that. There are various ways that could be handled if you are talking about the commercial mixed use. It would require rezoning, but there's a few different ways that the town could look to do that, one of which would be through what's called 40R. And I think Bill spoke a little bit about this last time, where one of the benefits is that there is a financial benefit to the town compared to if the town did its own type of Yarmouth-specific overlay. You're not getting that same state benefit. But it would give you more opportunity to kind of tailor. Then just 2 more on that page. There was a suggestion to look at pad split was the reference, so I looked into what that was. And to me, unless I'm stand to be corrected. If, please let me know if I am not explaining this correctly, but essentially that amounts to what sounds like SRO units, single room occupancy, where the tenant has their own private bedroom, usually private bathroom, but there's shared facilities such as a shared kitchen. And so the only caveat with that, and this may not be a priority, is that it may not count on the SHI. It depends on, it's very specific what types of subsidy programs specifically support and allow SROs. And so that's just one piece to consider. And then lastly, there was a suggestion from a member of the public to just focus on keeping it as an educational use. So I know that's a lot, but that's the narrowed down version from the 26. And then on the back page, these are some of those ancillary ideas that I was referencing that really I wouldn't say preclude anything. You know, there was a lot of talk. You can see just the number of times this was referenced, a very popular idea, having municipal or essential worker housing. And I think just one thing to just be very aware of with that, it is definitely a gray area with regard to if you're talking about local preference versus set-asides, when we're talking about something that's supported with public funds. I did find one example of a community that does have specific set-aside housing for municipal employees in Lexington, but I do not know anything about the mechanism by which they, ensured that was compliant with fair housing law and all of those other considerations. So that's something that would need to be looked into more, but just the general need for municipal or essential worker housing, whether it's by local preference or if the town determines there's a way to do it as a set-aside, that was clearly a high-level, highly desired idea. And there were some, I think, specific notes. Some people really were talking about distinctions within there, like first responders, and others were just talking more broadly. And then just last two, thinking about the grant focus for infrastructure when you're thinking about the types of housing that might make the town competitive, since there's likely going to be a need for sewer, given the wells on the site and around the site. And I believe in your packet, there is there, the
MassWorks?
yes, is that? Yeah,
So
okay,
we don't
good.
have to, that's
Yeah,
a
we don't need to go over that
9-page
today, but-
document, but it's just examples of things that have been funded by MassWorks or Housing Works that would fit on this site, and fit on Cape Cod and fit in Yarmouth. So that's just in
Yeah.
there, just to keep that conversation going.
Yes, I would say digest that between now and the third meeting, because I think that's the type of thing that might be more, we might want to look at more specifically as you pick an idea. But yeah, so that really just compiles different types of grants that have been awarded recently, either for the infrastructure installation itself or sometimes for the actual planning of the infrastructure. So depending on, when the town might be looking to apply for a grant, that's something to consider. And then the last ancillary idea that I don't think precludes any other idea is just encouraging solar on the site. In terms of, whether, I really like the idea of a solar carport if the general area where the solar is, if that's not something that can easily be changed. But also just ideas about including solar on the roofs of any of the buildings. And so that is the collective group ideas. Is there anything in the way that we grouped those into 16 that you think missed something that you had shared? Because we don't want anybody's ideas to be lost.
I reviewed it against all the minutes, and I thought it was a pretty good job.
I have a quick question. This 70-acre parcel is not just going to be 100% housing, correct? There'll be other uses?
Well, that's what's supposed to come out of the mud.
But, so, my understanding is originally there was talk about tourism and education and other things. Are there other committees in town that are also doing similar things? So this parcel would not be 100% housing. Housing would just be a portion of it, correct?
It's a serious consideration for the site. for part of the site.
For part of the site,
Yeah.
but not the entire site.
That's my understanding.
So Mayor, before we jump into the discussion, I have a housekeeping item. I think we have a quorum here. I'd like to call the Affordable Housing Trust to order, and I'll read through this quickly. This is to formally advise that it's required by MGL Chapter 38, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on June 16, 2021, is extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Affordable Housing Trust will hold a public meeting at 3:45 p.m. On February 24, 2025. Meeting will be recorded. Public is welcome to attend, or we have the address for this meeting on our website. And with that, I'll take a roll call to open the meeting. Bob?
Present.
Mark Forrest?
Present.
Robert Rittenauer, present. So we're in order here.
Official.
And just one other matter, we have the Zoom to 4:45 only. Sorry, everybody on Zoom, but hopefully we'll be done by 4:45 in person and on Zoom. And if we have to have another meeting to continue this, we already have a date scheduled for March 17th. We can have MUC 2B on that date. So just, there's a lot to talk about here. So
I had a quick question on Forest Road. Drew, the RFP went out for that?
It's going to go out next week.
Okay, in the RFP, is there any, does it address a certain type of housing, or is it addressing developers coming in with ideas for the housing, density, things like that?
Housing, as far as type of housing goes, it's, we indicated the types of buildings we would like, and that they would be for the low-income people, because that's the charge of the housing authority. I forget the percentages involved, but not, much less than 80% of the area median income. And it would only use part of the acreage, probably less than half of the acreage.
So it was multifamily units then, or?
There would be some, there would be one, well, we're leaving that to the discretion of the developers, yeah. But we envisioned one building that was 2 stories, possibly, and a couple of other buildings that were 1-story apartments. 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, maybe some 3-bedroom units, a total of 49 units or 50 units with 90 bedrooms together. Was that the idea?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
So I could start with, there was a couple of members that emailed me their comments. Do you want me to start with that?
Sure.
Just to kind of warm us up and give
Mary-
everybody else courage.
Sure. Can I just say one thing to the members who made it a quorum after I said, I just want to make sure that if there's anything in the summary of responses that is, doesn't capture what you said correctly or is missing something from your notes, if you could just let Mary know, because I believe this is going to kind of go into the minutes. So we want to make sure it's all accurate. So just let Mary know, she'll let us know, and we'll make those changes. And so it's in the one that says Summary of Housing MUC 1 Responses. And that is just kind of a direct transposing from forms that were submitted, but also our meeting notes from the discussions that we had during MUC 1.
So Myra Sahenich couldn't be here today. I'll go over hers. Josh is watching, but he's not able to speak. So I'll read his. Then I'll summarize Lee Hamilton's, and she's on Zoom, so maybe she can chime in after me if I don't get it right. But anyways, Myra Sahenich, number 1, cluster housing / protected undisturbed land. Number 2, housing diversity. Number 3, senior housing. Josh liked these three ideas in this order: housing diversity, mixed use, single-family ownership. And then Lee was mixed housing types with a joint project with Habitat, a rental development. Number 2, mixed-use development. And number 3, the village center homes with the ADUs attached.
Can I just ask a quick question about Lee's? So for Lee's number 1, the Habitat partnership was,
She's unmuted, so you can
sorry.
ask her right now. Go ahead.
Yep.
Go ahead, can you hear us?
It's number 7,
yep, okay.
what I proposed originally in my thoughts, and Habitat in the mixed-use rental. And I just want to clarify that my promoting the ADU was for a small number of units. Because I think they're going to take more property according to what was talked. They're going to take require an acre. So I'm thinking maybe only 5 ADU units, not a whole lot. I'm not sure there's a real need for it or interest, but I think it should be very limited. And the mixed use some of the discussion went all over the place, but I completely support the upgrade and renovation of the gym in the auditorium. I think that's crucial. I don't know what else can be included, so I'll mute myself now. Any questions on my comments?
No, that's very helpful, thank you.
And I know I went quickly, it's just I know that people who are on Zoom sometimes, they're called on last, just the way it goes.
Or not called on at all.
Not called on at all. I don't know if you want to go to Palm next, because she's Palm.
Hello.
Hi, did you have any thoughts about what were your 3 priority ideas?
Did I have any thoughts? Yeah. Basically, I believe that we should have a portion of that for seniors and mixing it with commercial buildings as well in terms of affordability and the need for our town. That's it.
That's good.
Can I ask, for the senior housing, do you mean like age-restricted senior housing, or?
No.
Okay.
So it's that senior-friendly piece, like the design.
Yeah, like first floor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how you guys want to run it now. Just
Yeah,
go
so
around the
thank you.
room,
Yeah,
or-
so what we're hoping is that as we go around, this discussion naturally lends itself to some sort of conclusion to have us do our additional homework between meetings. If, as it's getting close to the end, we find that it's not, we are prepared, if the chairs would like to do this method, to take a vote if need be, because the goal of these meetings is to narrow down these ideas to 3 ideas. And they can be combined. So even in these responses we've heard so far, we've heard a desire, that some of these things are kind of, grouped with this or grouped with that. I think that I suspect that the voting might be more of a necessity in the 3rd meeting, but we are prepared to do that for this meeting if need be. So what I wanted to suggest is, if you need a minute to do this, that's fine, but I would love it if you could actually write down in your packet the one that looks like this, that groups the ideas together. Just take a minute and memorialize for us, before we go around, what would be your top idea, your 2nd highest priority, and your 3rd highest priority. And feel free, if you want to indicate that it is kind of contingent on, being paired with some other thing, let us know. If you've already done that, this might be a good time, if you want to take a look at some of the maps to, if that kind of informs your decision, please feel free. But I think if we just take just a minute to do that, your top 3 ideas that may help us whittle this down really efficiently, because you guys there was so much consensus during meeting one, we may find that is the case again. That said, I do want to go back to a comment earlier about housing, asking about whether housing is a part of the site or not, or if it's, for the full use. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, but I would assume that if someone feels that way, they should go with mixed use as one of their priorities. Because otherwise, I mean, that is, you want to make sure that if you strongly feel that the site should be for more than just housing, that mixed use, to some degree, however that may be.
Sorry to interrupt again. So I'm really confused. This site is not 100% for housing. There will be other uses, correct? Yes. I'm seeing yes. Okay, all right.
Sit up at the front. I don't have to do this.
Thank you. It's good exercise. There are several teams approaching the issue from a different sector perspective. So there is housing, there's economic development, there's education, there's recreation, open space and water supply, and municipal facilities. So the idea is that all these groups represent people that are vested in each one of those topics, and they come up with their ideas. If you're coming up with an idea that the whole site should be that, then that's what it is. And then what happens is you propose to the MUC committee in your last iteration an elevated development or a moderate development. Then the MUC committee with their consultant puts together the plan amongst all the different land uses. Essentially, it's somewhat of a collaboration and somewhat of a competition.
So it could be 100% housing, and it could not be 100% housing.
Given your HPP, I think you're probably going to have some housing on it. I mean, your HPP shows a big need for housing, and it's difficult to find a site because of all the water supply protection and other type of land. So I think what you want to do is stick to not that you're sticking to the silo, it's good to think about the other groups, because there is cross-referencing, especially with recreation and economic development. There's been talk about a sports facility. So you'll find that you might want to wander into another area, and that's okay, for you to do that. Then when these separate, all of your sort of muck around ideas, down to the 3, down to the 1, that all goes to the committee and the consultant, and then they start putting together the puzzle. The important thing is we don't want to be, a few years into this and then have a committee come up and say, why didn't you think of this? So everything's on the table right now. Then we hire consultants after we have a conversation amongst ourselves.
Thank you.
Mary, I'll keep it.
I gave you. So Mark, can I just show you the board real quick while everybody's kind of making their notes? All right. Take the mic.
I knew that. I just wasn't 100% sure.
So this is just all to scale. Kathy Williams was really great helping me put this together.
Because
So these rectangles on the top, they're all, like, you can go and move these around. They have blue tape on the back. It's 4, 6, 8, and 10 acre rectangles. So if somebody said, oh, we need 6 acres, you could move this around the site, see where it fit. This little cluster subdivision is what Habitat is proposing on Route 28. The lots are very small, but it does show that if you had a cluster subdivision, it could fit into that corner kind of nicely. This is Yarmouth Commons to scale. That's 69 units.
you have
This is Yarmouth Gardens, which is on Route 28 as well. That's 40 units.
space, so I like that.
This is a development that's on the island. What town did we say it was?
Bluffs.
Oak Bluffs.
Bad idea.
So this is, I think this is 10 acres, 60 units. So if you wanted something that was 6 units per acre, this is how much space you would need to do 60 units. So it just gives you kind of an idea of what it looks like on the site. And I think that it really does show that you can fit more than one use, one municipal use, even commercial use. You have room on the site to do that.
Yes. So what we'll do when we go around is we're just tallying if there's, if someone specifically notes that something is their first choice, their second choice, their third choice. And that does make it easier to kind of, I guess, if you will, to weigh the responses if needed. Again, it may come to that doesn't even need to happen, but just it will make it a little easier to frame the discussion going forward if we know kind of what is, super high priority versus icing on the cake. We've already noted the ones that shared previously, and I would suggest that we just go around, and if someone wants to share, again, it's most helpful for us if you refer to how they're grouped on this table, because we already did some pre-grouping. But if there's something that is not really specific to what it is you're saying, let us know, and we'll make sure to account for that separately. So, I mean, if we're going around, I would suggest just starting here, unless, are you prepared?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Using the housing diversity. First, I wouldn't propose to use all of the land. There should be some open space.
Okay.
But the housing variety, I think you wanted to call it, rather than diversity.
Yep.
I think that would be important for me,
Okay.
to have different types of housing within the scope of however much land we ultimately use. Then I would say the senior housing, working together with the housing authority in some other, in an area that may be separate. And then the third would be, I believe that we should keep the gymnasium and auditorium in some form, allowing recreation to use additional land for fields, shall we say. There are some fields existing there, but there may be some more that could be put into the parcel.
Okay, great. So, and then I'll just always ask, just to make sure I got everything right. So housing diversity or variety, you put as first choice with a note that would, be kind of contingent on keeping open space, not the entire site as housing. And then the second was senior housing, perhaps in partnership with the housing authority. And is that, when you reference that, are you talking about like age restricted? Because if it's the housing authority, it would.
It'd be age restricted.
Yes,
then.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then the third choice would be keeping and reusing the gymnasium and the auditorium for some sort of use.
Of recreation department, because
Right.
they had made, I thought, a pretty good presentation.
Yes, yes. All right, great. So,
Just me.
okay. So I'm just going to make a note recreation on that. All right. Good.
Okay, on mine, my number one choice is the housing diversity, and I think that's important in that it does incorporate many of the standalone items, and, just from looking at the site, I think that you could meet multiple housing needs. It doesn't have to be one homogeneous way of looking at it, and I would like to see, mixed incomes, mixed groups, and so number one is housing diversity. My number two is the mixed use. And I say that because I think it is important to acknowledge that there are significant recreational community facilities, resources on the property right now, including the fields, the gym, the auditorium. You may not want to have just that gym the way it's configured now, but I think that there's plenty of room out there to meet housing needs, plus also some community recreation, community center needs. And that's the type of mixed use that I was thinking of when I say that. And my number three, I think that, I'd like to see one of our priorities be to engage the housing authority, directly in some discussions of potentially moving the Forest Avenue units to this site. It may be a site that is more accepted by the community. I know that every time the Forest Avenue site comes up, there's like a stampede of horses outside. It's just so difficult for us town officials to deal with. I think if we had some options on the table there, it might be helpful. So that's 1, 2, 3 for me.
Great. Thank you. And then can I just ask, so with regard to the mixed use, I made in my notes that is kind of potentially related to the reuse of the existing structure. It kind of is blending those two ideas because, but it sounded like you were talking, for the mixed use, it was more about community uses, not commercial.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I think, what's important to note, though, I'm talking about the use. I'm not talking about the structures. As an example, yes, it would be very difficult for us to lose that gymnasium that's out there now because it's so heavily used. Yet, if I were developing a facility with a gymnasium, it would look nothing like that. There's maybe modern facilities that could house more than one gymnasium, or a combination of indoor multi-use space that could be more modern and adaptable and meet more needs. So it may very well be that there's gym space, but not the way it's done now. But I'm open to that use as opposed to just which brick and things of that nature.
Yep. Thanks, that's a good clarification.
Hello, this is Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Oh, now she muted.
Okay, she's on the phone.
Okay, great.
So the next is Mark.
Yes, Mark.
Did Lee want to say something?
No, I think she muted. 'cause
She
she's
just
on
wanted
the
to-
phone call. We'll touch base with her at the end.
All right. I would say that I would vote pretty much in line with the town administrator in terms of his 3 options. I do think with the site, it's important to emphasize, with any site where we're developing housing, particularly in this area, the infrastructure, wastewater, has to be a paramount. If we don't have the wastewater infrastructure, then, as far as I'm concerned, this is all an interesting conversation, but I don't think it's realistic. That whole corridor on that street is our water supply. I mean, that Higgins Crow Road, we have well fields on all sides of that road. So everything that we do needs to be focused on wastewater infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons why I have real concerns about this Forest Road project, is because there's no significant wastewater infrastructure there. I am concerned about conflicts in this site. I see in terms of looking at potential opportunities, I see a lot of housing clustered, for example, next to the police station. That's probably not something that I would want to do. I think we need to be cognizant of the abutters, and it's good to be focused on the natural resource abutters, but I also believe that we want to be careful about how that's developed. So at some point as we move forward on that, we're going to have to give a lot more thought to, what's a compatible, even while we're talking about mixed uses, what's compatible with the police facility, particularly with the ongoing training that's going on at that site. I think there's an expectation that we're going to be allowing significant public safety training to go on in that facility, and I'd hate to create a use that would be somewhat incompatible with that. So I think as we go forward, we need to keep that in mind. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mark, you had mentioned that you were largely in line with the town administrator's comments. So I did put you, I put a number 1 for the housing variety. Now, Bob had indicated mixed use as the second choice, and the third choice being the housing authority partnership. I added separately, I'll have to, some of this is the after meeting notes and consolidation, but I did note that a lot of it is consideration about what is compatible where on the site with regard to, the surrounding areas, wastewater infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So those notes are
Good.
in there as well. I just wanted to make sure that in terms of how I put your rankings, that made sense.
Yes.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
And the next.
My name's Drew Kraus. I'm on the Housing Authority. And as far as the housing for this site goes, I think their suggestions, the three two previous suggestions are quite good. They make sense to me, including the idea of if you're going to have recreational in a gym, we don't know if it would be this particular structure or not. It's the use. In terms of the partnering with the housing authority, the thing that happened is that the housing authority happens to own about 19 acres of land along Forest Road, and to try to fulfill our mission of providing housing that's affordable for lower income people, we are going to send out a request for proposals, and there's a lot of people in the neighborhood adjacent to this that don't like the idea at all. We partnered with the Mass Housing Partnership and got advice from the Mass Housing Partnership as to what might be feasible to proceed, and we are going on that basis. And so the proposal is tailored to be of a size that could be handled wastewater-wise with innovative and alternative, so-called innovative and alternative septic treatment. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know what developers will respond in that way, but I have the feeling that that's quite possible, that it will be quite feasible to do that. So I would like that request for proposals to go out next week and see what happens, to see if we get any bites on that. And if we don't, that's a different story. But that's the reason that I think it's a possibly a feasible proposal as a non-expert. That's my comment on that.
So can I just, so I appreciate that, kind of background there with regard to how this might fit into the Housing Authority's mission and whatnot. And that I think that's something that will continue to, depending on how this group leaves things at the end of today, that's worth looking into at the next meeting as well. That said, I mean, are there any other ideas that do strongly resonate with you for this site other than,
Just going along with what's been said before. Well, I originally had brought up the Soldier On idea of supportive housing so that could possibly be a carve-out of some kind,
Okay,
It's a type of housing.
It's a
Yes.
type of housing, yeah.
okay.
May fit into housing diversity.
Right, I know, that's, again, these ideas are not all, mutually exclusive or anything like that. Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Hi, I'm Greg Wheeler. I love the look of the Orleans setup with the green spaces, the different types of housing. We've got some single family, some townhouses, some apartments. I've taken with that. I think it looks great. I think it would fit into that neighborhood. As far as the types of people who would be served by this, as many as possible, as many different types as possible. I don't think there are any bad ideas as far as whether it's disabilities or seniors or veterans or low income or moderate income. A little bit of everything, I think, works. However, if I needed to prioritize, I'm with Drew. I kind of like the Soldier On. Veteran Services would be a part of it. I understand there could be an issue with discrimination, if that's the right word, for municipal employee priority, but I think that's important for the town to retain police officers, firefighters, first responders, people who work at the hospital. These are important things that the fire department and the police department are having trouble keeping people, and they're losing people to other towns on the Cape. I think it's important that we try and keep the people who keep us safe in town. Third would be elderly and disabled people.
Okay.
Housing for them.
Do you have a sense of whether this is age-restricted senior housing or it just housing kind of designed, age-friendly
I
housing?
think designed for elderly and disabled, not
Okay.
necessarily age-restricted.
Okay, great.
I'm also a big fan of the mixed-use idea, a little bit of everything on that property.
Okay, great. So I did note the housing variety, ideally, if we are talking about kind of carving things out, you would want to prioritize the supportive housing for veterans and look further at the municipal housing. And I do want to clarify, I'm not, this is like the type of thing that would be, town council is the one who guides you on that. It's hard to find examples.
In my career, I understand there are many people who would push back on that. What about me? It's not fair to me. Well, if your house is burning down, it would be fair to you that there'd be a fire person around to help, to make sure they put it out.
Right. And, you know, another thing to keep in mind with that is with the Affordable Homes Act, the communities that are ultimately designated as seasonal communities, which I know Yarmouth is right on that cusp, but there's a clear allowance for that sort of preference within there, which is interesting. I think we're awaiting guidance on how that will all play out, but thank you.
It's a more popular concept than when we last were thinking about a substantial subsidy for housing. So when we did Yarmouth Commons and Yarmouth Gardens, we brought that up to the developers and the state, but there was no real support or mechanism. Now there seems to be more support on the state level for
I
those.
recently was told, I won't say by who, that we're losing fire staff to other towns on the Cape because the number of runs here in Yarmouth are the most on the Cape. So people are going to Orleans or Chatham because they don't have to work as hard and they make the same amount of money. We need to keep people here. I don't want my house to burn down.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a public safety issue. Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much.
I think I'm next. Hi there. Joanne Crowley, representative from the Planning Board. My thoughts are, one, I wanted to pick up on Select Board Member Mark's comments about some kind of a buffer zone that needs to be established with the police department, especially with our outreach to other communities to do the training for their police. And I think there's going to may be noise issues, traffic issues. And so I think some kind of a buffer on that boundary is I think, a really good idea. Of course, the number one idea that I like is the one I offered, single-family homes with ADUs.
Yep.
But I also see that cluster housing and protecting land around it, and we do have zoning requirements. The cluster development that's brand new up on Route 6A had a requirement for open space that's written right into the zoning. And then the third would be the housing variety, which I think really those two are a piece of housing variety. And why they couldn't be just part of housing variety, they might easily slip in there as just one different type of housing with relation to it. And again, my focus has been on use, not on the tenant. I think we may design things differently for seniors, certainly for disabled. We would design differently, and the site requirements might be different. But I focused on the use.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a kind of this is an example of something that might be fine-tuned later because there's use from a broad site design perspective, and then there's, okay, so now if we want to prioritize the needs of, for example, seniors or those who need more accessible housing, there's no reason that can't be part of that process. It's just not as, it's not as much of a factor on how the site is potentially designed as some of these other things. So I appreciate that comment. So I did note what you were saying about the buffer zone with police, but just to make sure I captured it correctly, the single family with ADUs was kind of the top. And then the cluster housing and protecting undisturbed land. But you also noted that there's provisions in the zoning relating to this. And then the third choice would be just more broadly speaking to housing variety. So that's,
Which again, I think that number 1 and 2 are really just part of number 3.
yes, yep. Wonderful. Great, thanks.
Okay, I'm John Barr, Housing Committee member, and mixed use is at the top of my list. Again, trying to create kind of a community center as part of the overall development of the property with some ancillary uses that are sort of serving the housing needs of the different types of housing that are there. I'd like to see housing maximized on the site and still maintain preserved green space and common space, because this is really one of the last, maybe the last sizable parcel that the town has for housing. Number 2 would be just the variety of housing types and housing diversity that has already been talked about. And number 3, I'd hate to see, I know it's a can of worms, but I would hate to see the 49 units be transferred from Forest Road. Maybe that development goes down a little bit depending on what happens with the RFP. But we need housing badly, and nobody, this NIMBY idea is certainly out there, and it's something that I think we have to try and work around and address the housing issues as much as possible.
Great. So,
I'd like to circle over to, is there anybody on Zoom, Lee or Pam? Now that you've heard everybody, is there any other comments you'd like to make?
I would just, if I could, I would just add, the concern that pushing the, Yarmouth Housing Authority into this property because people in the area don't like it. And I understand the concern, they went to those meetings, but if they do a really good development, these abutters can just complain about whatever happens, and I understand the town officials are reluctant to go there, but if you push that on this property, then there's less housing that we can develop there. So I agree with Joe, thank you.
okay.
And Pam, did you want to follow up on your comments now that you've heard everybody else?
Yeah, I actually would, for my number 1, I believe that housing diversity, as long as that kind of factors in with the reuse of current buildings. So I really like the idea of converting the classrooms into 1-bedroom apartments, kind of to utilize the space and the structure that's already there. But that would be my number 1. My number 2 would be the senior friendly idea, and my number 3 would be the housing for veterans.
I'm sorry, I should have said maintain the gymnasium and the auditorium in some form as well.
Okay.
So when you said, do you want to maintain the use or like?
Well,
You comfortable with that?
maintain the use. Bob's comment was a good one, I think, in terms of if they are, I don't know that the report was broken out to address those 2 buildings separately from the classrooms, but the use is the important thing, I think, to have recreation uses and community uses on the site.
So it ties in again to that idea of the mixed use from kind of a community perspective. Whereas I know, Palm, it sounds like, and I know you had included this on your forms as well, that it's the idea of, especially like in the idea of using the classrooms as well to create housing. So who knows, maybe by MUC 3 we can do a little more kind of analysis and look at the information available to see how that might, how that kind of desire to protect all or some of the existing structure or use can roll into any of these. But so I know that, so at our next meeting, what we are charged with is presenting 3 ideas that then this group narrows down to 1. And I had mentioned that I do feel like that is probably where there's going to be more of a need for voting, because I don't think that is currently necessary, because there's so much consensus about the housing variety. I do.
Can we just as we did with the people that were online, maybe there's somebody else that heard something that kind of tweaked
Sure.
their, was there anybody that wanted to follow up on any comments they made, or? No? Okay, I just.
One thing I would throw out there, if you are sharing the site and you're looking at, the possible community uses, I think it's important not to separate that out from a commercial use. It may very well be that if you had room on the site, you could issue an RFP for sort of a multi-purpose community use facility that could be privately managed, and with the town. A lot of communities have privately developed these community facilities.
Yep.
And had it so that some commercial uses, whether it's, types of trade shows or boat shows, could be held at certain times, but you'd have the flexible gymnasium space that the town would be granted a minimum sort of usage, and that way, you could also have enough space to do regional tournaments and things of that nature. But it may not be, it may be something that in order to construct it, it's kind of a level higher than what can be managed by the Recreation Committee.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I know, just offhand even, because I know I've looked into this before, there are examples of, municipal properties, lots of examples, being leased for a variety of reasons, sometimes for, next to nothing, essentially, because it's supporting community activities and whatnot. So I think that might be, I know we had looked at case studies for today for housing to consider things like, okay, what types of projects are getting infrastructure grants, and what types of densities or building heights and things like that are something that might be compatible with what Yarmouth is looking for. I think it might be helpful for us to kind of do a similar look for if that building is retained, maybe it's not necessarily the town operating it, but if it's being leased or something to, a private management or something. So I want to look for some examples of that to kind of see how that's structured. I know one example right off the top of my head in Duxbury, an old library that is, was rehabilitated to some extent and is now used for it's a youth group that runs out of it, but it's widely popular. It's not nearly comparable to, I think, what you're talking about with the size of something that has a gym and an auditorium, but it's just something that comes to mind, and I think we could look for some other examples that might help inform this group's decision. The other things that, based on what I've heard, I feel like we might want to do a little more homework on, and I'll confirm more with staff, but for the supportive housing for veterans, for if, as people who suggested that mentioned, that's not, that's something that potentially could be within the idea of housing diversity. It may be that when we're narrowing down from 3 ideas, it may even be that it might be something like where one idea is the housing diversity where part is carved off for Soldier On or similar organization versus not, and I just think that this group might need more information to decide some of those things, and same with the Habitat Partnership. So anything where we're talking about, partitioning off parts of the site for specific housing needs, or selling some of the, single-family lots for private development, understanding that that would bring in funds for other uses on the site. So all those sorts of things, I think, unless anyone disagrees, I feel like you have enough kind of examples of other semi-recent housing projects that we may have done our homework on that, but I think we need to do a little more homework on some of these other pieces to inform the discussions at the next meeting. Is there anything else that you feel like you would want more information on to be able to make a decision?
The question to me would be, you seem to be separating housing from the recreation. So if we have to pick one, you're kind of indicating, well, we have to pick, as an example, housing. I can't have, because it doesn't fit into those silos, boxes, whatever, the recreation.
Oh, no, I do think that kind of came out in the discussions about the mixed use on the site and the reuse of yes. So I think what's going to happen, though, next, and I don't feel equipped to give you 3 ideas, clean ideas right now. I can broadly talk about the things that we've heard, but the 3 ideas that the committee confers on and discusses next time, one might just be housing. I don't think so, based on what we heard, but another might be housing with recreation on site using the existing building or not. And so on and so forth.
So you'll define that as, that would be
Yes.
a priority. See, okay.
Yes,
Because the
yes.
way you were describing it, we were going to have to pick one of the 3.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
And they were,
Yeah, so the next
seemed to be-
step for this committee at the next meeting is that all of these ideas boil down into 3 ideas. And before we wrap up, I mean, maybe it would be helpful to hear from you. I mean, I feel like we need to distill what we heard a bit, but you may have, whatever the 3 ideas are, yes, this group would need to pick one to bring forward to the MUC group that is going to be looked at 2 different levels. Is that looking at the, whether the school remains on the site or not, or is it more just about the intensity?
So if I may, Bill Scott, Assistant Town Administrator. The selectmen requested 3 plans come back to them, 3 alternative scenarios. We've already talked to the schools about one of those scenarios, including a school. So regardless of where they are in their process, we would take all the other ideas and then pick out a portion of the site that would be approximate to their needs, which is about 10 acres, and highlight that. That would be one alternative. The many to 3 to 1 is an opportunity for the group to combine the best parts of the many to the 3, then to 1. It may be that you have the final proposal having components of the 3 proposals that you saw. So to your point, Bob, you might have recreation on the site, community park, and other things that would be part of your final proposal. And then the elevated versus moderate is basically if you were to be asked to cut the project back, what would be a lower scale and an upper scale of that. And what that does is it gives the Utilization Committee the ability to go all the way back to your brainstorming and all the way forward to your singular proposal, and then start mixing and matching them. So there will be further work with your committees and the MUC committee as you move forward. But this gets everything on the table so that by the time we get a consultant on board and all the more definitive discussions happen, you've already thought about it as a group.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead, Lee.
Yes.
If we have this economic development and a recreation, different groups, 2 different MUC groups, it might be helpful for us to know what they're proposing, what their thoughts are, so we're not duplicating what we're suggesting, because we should really be sticking to housing.
If I may, on that, you're ahead of everybody else, so we will be doing the same. We're doing the same thing everywhere else, and then we're going to start cross-pollinating or sharing the information. Tonight, the CDC has their meeting. That's the Economic Development Group. The Chamber Group had their meeting already. So we figure probably in a couple of weeks, we'll have all the different ideas in from MUC 1.
And Kathy would like to.
Kathy Williams, Town Planner. I'm just wondering whether, I've heard a lot of generalizations, but I'm wondering, do we have an idea of how many units you were hoping to create on this site? What acreage? I mean, we just gave some different examples of, 4, 6, 8, 10, and some examples. What area and what number of units do you guys think you would like to be creating? Any idea?
I think I need to work with you a little bit more, right? So, and I hope everybody can, we lose the Zoom at 4:45, but I'm hoping that people who are here in the room can spend some time at the boards with me. So we did cut out a 2-scale cluster subdivision that Habitat is proposing, but Kathy reminded me that that's a Chapter 40B cluster subdivision. So we might want to figure out if a cluster subdivision that's allowed by our zoning bylaw right now, if that would fit there. So I think that we need to discuss that a little bit, like if we were gonna carve off lots that we were gonna sell for private development to raise money for the gym, the new gym or the new auditorium or whatever, we need to see how that gets laid out at the site. So I think that's the next step.
Even with a cluster subdivision, the minimum lot size is 42,000 square feet, so that's an acre. So it's basically 1 unit per acre. With an ADU, that's 2 units per acre, even if you have green space around it. So it's a very low density, and so that's why I was trying to get an idea of kind of what were you guys thinking, what was the comfort level, and that's why these examples can kind of help give you an idea of what the densities are and the sizes.
Thank you. And the only other thing that I just want to say, just on our preliminaries tally here, I mean, the housing diversity, that is so universally desired that I would suggest that be in all 3 scenarios that get discussed. It may just be that there's some fine tuning. I do think that this group's going to have to wrestle more with whether the housing authority, if that should be included in the 3 scenarios or not. Because ultimately, honestly, for me, going to the next, preparing for your next meeting where we're asking you to narrow down 3 to one idea, the only thing that I still feel like it would be helpful to have guidance from this group, and I don't know how the chairs would want to handle this, would be whether you want that to be included in one of the 3 ideas or not. It came up, there were a couple of suggestions in favor, and then there were also simultaneous, I believe, 2 who expressed concerns about that. So it's, do you want to use that in your 3 ideas or not? I feel like either way, I just want the group to determine because it's so specific.
Could you say what that is again?
Yeah, sure. So for the housing authority, there were multiple references to, housing authority development on the site. I think it's a question of whether the Forest Road proposed project would move to this site or not, and then nothing happens on Forest Road. So I think it's, like that, in my mind, is a scenario in and of itself. So
I think that this is what I'm gonna spin off of what Drew just said. I think that if the housing authority puts out the RFP and they get 10 proposals and they're all really great proposals and they're gonna, and there's proposers that are gonna listen to the town, right? Then I think it's pretty safe to say that bringing those units over to this site just probably won't happen. If the housing authority puts out this RFP and gets crickets, right? Either proposals that are substandard or no proposals at all, and I've been in that situation before where I've put out an RFP that I thought was pretty good and nobody seemed to have interest in it, then I think that then it should come back to be a topic here.
Okay.
So basically what you're saying is until the RFP goes out, and it depends on responses.
How much time are you giving for the response, Drew? Okay.
So
It's normally 3 weeks or a
Oh, it's
month.
going to be 6 to 8 weeks.
the housing
It's the
authority
value.
owns this property, and if the housing authority gets an RFP that works for them, this is a done deal, correct?
Well, it's up to them. They decide.
I get it, but I mean, but if they get an RFP,
you see-
there's
you
nothing
see
the
those
town
two
can do to stop it, or citizens can do. They own the property, and that's it.
We'll still have to go through permitting and whatnot. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, so,
But if they issue the RFP and people are like, no way, I'm not going there, right? And that does happen. I mean, it's more expensive to develop on the Cape.
so I
It
just want
might
to,
not be a good time for
I'm
other
against
developers.
that project. However, and the reason is I don't want undeveloped land developed. We don't have much left. and
undisturbed.
we are, we're losing it. Yes, I'm sorry, we're losing it. However, I'm also in favor of housing, so I'm kind of stuck in the middle. I want as much housing as possible. You asked how many units? As many as possible.
And I think that sentiment is fairly strong in the community as well. And I hate going back to the wastewater infrastructure, but I'm not necessarily keen that the wastewater infrastructure being associated with the Forest Road project is going to be sufficient enough, at least in my estimation, all right? I don't see that project coming with a sewer line or sewer infrastructure. I think it's going to be some kind of innovative alternative system that may, in some way, attempt to meet some of these new standards. And this is all an experimental area. And again, this is why, when we look at this site, I'm anticipating this site is coming with sewer. I mean, that's a given. That's a given. It's going to have infrastructure. We're going to protect our water resources. We're in an area where there's significant water resources that need to be protected. I've spent my career cleaning up groundwater contamination from one end of Cape Cod to the other. The last thing I want to see is Yarmouth repeating the mistakes that so many others have made, all right? So that's something that we just have to avoid.
so if I may, I actually, now that I'm realizing that between now and the next meeting, that RFP will be public. So that information, I think, will kind of help how we frame that and how that gets built into scenarios. So I would actually suggest that we do keep that on the table for within the scenarios. And so that I can look at the RFP, like how much of the site is it talking about? You know, I know you said the acreage of the site altogether, but, and then, you know, this group will have to narrow it down, but I'll take.
You should
direction
just
from
be
the
prepared.
chairs.
We may not have a consensus. There may be clearly some differences of opinion.
Right, and so.
We may not get
yeah.
to that point.
So
where
we
we've
will
got a
work with
group.
the chairs and determine how they want to handle that. But I think what we need to do, I mean, very clearly, all three options are going to include housing diversity. I think what we need to wrestle with a little bit more is, okay, and the ones that have a mixed-use community component, what that might look like. We did hear a couple mentions about commercial as well. So we need to kind of think through how to smooth this down a bit more based on the feedback that we got today. And then at that next meeting, what I'm wondering, Mary, is I know for that meeting on the 17th, is there the opportunity to give the groups kind of a preliminary, whether it's a survey or something, based on what we digest? I think that would really be helpful for us because it's hard to narrow down live in action when we're hearing from you. So that would be really helpful if we could do that, if I could work with you to disseminate some sort of, maybe we're only able to narrow it down to 5 or something, then we can be prepared for that next meeting based on that. Would that be okay with both groups?
I think we can send out a survey in between.
Okay,
Yep. And the Housing Committee does meet on March 10th.
okay.
So maybe some of the trustees can come to that meeting if we really don't, if you feel we need more time, The other thing is, we can use March 17th as muck to be.
Well, I think if we're able to
But
survey the group
we're
in
very
advance,
close. Yeah, okay.
we'll definitely be able to narrow it down. And then ultimately, what I suspect, like I said, it may be that there's there might not be consensus, and then the group, depending on how we want to structure this with the chairs, maybe it does go down to a vote for the final proposal that goes to the MUC committee. But
I'm hearing the chair is asking me for some more information. The building study that was
Building
relayed,
survey, yeah.
right? The building survey, I can get that for you. If you, if you stay, I can print it out for you
Great.
right now.
Yep.
The RFP, people are asking to see the RFP for Forest Road. Is that something, Drew, you can get for us? Is there any other type of information?
we're going to do some examination about like municipal buildings that are leased out.
Yep.
So we're going to look at that.
Anybody from, we're going to lose the Zoom link in about 4 minutes, so I know there are people that are on the Zoom. Joe and Tom, if you had comments, would you mind emailing them to me at mwagon@yarmouth.ma.us? I don't think we have time to open it up because we're going to lose the Zoom link. Somebody needs to start a Zoom at 5 o'clock on this account.
Mary, just quickly, we're going to be posting all these videos on the MUC site. So we've collected them from the various entities, and they should be able to be up by Thursday of this week.
Are there also,
Be able to see how other people have spoken of this in their first meeting.
are any of the meeting notes also, like the materials we've done, is that going to?
I'm waiting for Recreation to hand in theirs. Chamber is sending theirs. Tonight is CDC. So as I said, this group is ahead of the other groups and haven't produced all of their muck-around literature.
Sure, okay, because I know I just have to make a couple changes, so I'll,
Don't worry about that. We amend.
okay,
things.
okay. All right. Well, great. So I guess Mary will connect with you all about the next steps between now and March 17th, whether it be a brief survey or something to just help us digest between that and this, how we can narrow this down for the last meeting.
And if we need another meeting, it's good to see that we're ahead of some of the other teams. I just want to make sure we do a good job, and we're all committed to this, so. But thank you. It's very helpful having your assistance here to organize us.
Well, staff has done an excellent job keeping everything organized for us, so it's been great. But, yeah, we look forward to the next meeting, and we'll be in touch through Mary.
Thanks, and thank you, Mary, very much.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to adjourn?
Yep.
So accept a motion.
A motion to adjourn,
Move we adjourn.
second. Roll call vote. Drew?
Yes?
Lee,
We approve.
then would you like to adjourn?
Sure.
Motion for the trust?
I'll move to adjourn
Second.
the trust.
Okay, all those in favor? Bob?
Bob, aye.
Mark?
Forrest says aye.
Rittenhour, aye. We're adjourned.
Makes sense to me.